Healing is about looking forward. Julia Deitchman joins us from Boardprep Recovery to share her recovery story. She talks about coming from a refugee family, the lingering realities that many still face from the Holocaust, and the complexities of religion. She explains the process of defining your higher power and coming to peace with and connecting to her roots. Enjoy. Welcome to the Illuminate Recovery podcast. We shed light on mental health issues, mental illness, and addiction recovery. Ways to cope, manage, and inspire. Beyond the self-care we will discuss, you may need the help of a licensed professional. My name's Kurt Nider. I'm a husband, a father, entrepreneur, a handyman, and a student of life. I avoid conflict, I deflect with humor, and I'm fascinated by the human experience.
And I'm Shelley Mangum. I am a clinical mental health counselor, and my favorite role of all times is grandma. I am a seeker of truth, and I feel like life should be approached with tremendous curiosity.
I ask the dumb questions.
I fill in the gaps.
The Illuminate Recovery podcast is brought to you by Illuminate Billing Advocates. Make billing and collection simple with leader in substance abuse and mental health billing services. Verification and analysis of benefits, pre-authorizations, utilization management, accurate claim submission and management, denial and appeal management, and industry-leading reporting. Improve your practice's cash flow and your ability to help your clients with Illuminate Billing Advocates.
Today I'm with Julia Deitchman. Julia is the admission coordinator at Boardprep Recovery Center. She's experienced program supervisor with a demonstrated history of working in the mental health industry. She's skilled in management, substance abuse prevention, substance use disorder, addiction recovery, and training. Julia offers hope and insight for others with similar backgrounds and experiences. Julia, I just really appreciate you being on with us today. Thank you.
Thanks for having me. I'm very excited. Thank you.
So let's just start with getting our listeners familiar with you. Talk about a little bit of how you ended up in the industry and what brings you here and what keeps you here.
Sure. It's been quite the long journey, and I forget how I got into it. A lot of times, it's been about 15 years that I've been in the field, and initially I got into it as a way to, because I'm an addict, I'm in recovery, and it was a way for me to sort of save face when I first got clean in 2006. 2006. I decided that I wanted to go back to school, and I think everybody in early recovery, has that kind of motivation. They want to do something different. They want to try something new. So I decided to go back to school, and I never went to high school. I dropped out after my first week of ninth grade, so I didn't have a high school diploma. And I've always been terrified of math. And so when I went at the time I was living in California, when I went to the community college, I realized that I had to pass, some math classes and get a GED before I could even enroll in college. And it was just by circumstance that I learned while I was there, and I was very disappointed that I had to do all that. And I was like, well, I'm not doing this, But then I learned at the same time that there was this program that you didn't really need a math in or a GED. It was a certificate program in human services, specific to drug and alcohol counseling. And this was fairly new. This was, early 2000s. There wasn't a lot of this. Now I know this, and because I've been around, it was a fairly new sort of, brainchild that was happening, was taking off in the field. That they were wanting more people who were in recovery to work in the field. And the only way they can do this was to get them certified or get them some kind of education, to be able to have them an entry level as a paraprofessional. And so I decided that, hey, I'm an addict. I'm in recovery. I have, 2 months clean. I can do this. I could be a counselor, and that's how I ended up, just going through the motions. And it turned out to be a lifelong journey. I absolutely love it. I don't know how to do anything else at this point in my life.
Oh, that's incredible.
Yeah.
And a lot of people that go through recovery want to give back, and it seems to be a good fit because it's a definitely a helping industry where you're helping people. And but I'm curious. I don't hear a lot of people tell me that they dropped out of school in the ninth grade. So that makes me think that you had a fairly colorful childhood.
Indeed, yes. And it seemed very normal at the time, my entire upbringing, until obviously I started working on myself and getting some clarity on who I was and who, what the world was actually. And then I realized, wow, I've had a pretty traumatic, you know, life, full of lots of different events. I was born and raised in communist Russia. um, yeah, we were Jewish. We ended up being religious refugees in the 80s coming to America, when I was about 9. And coming to America at the time, didn't consist of just flying over here. We had to literally flee, our home and live in different countries, homeless most of the time, penniless, hungry, and just sort of be ushered through different countries until somebody accepted us as a citizen. And so finally we ended up in America. And so that whole, experience as a 9-year old was pretty traumatic, but it seemed normal at the time. And then coming here and not really knowing anything about this culture or even about being Jewish, because we weren't allowed to practice Judaism or even talk about it back home. So then I was placed in a Jewish Hasidic school upon moving to America. So that was more culture shock. So it was constant. It was like a hit after hit after hit after hit. Growing up and having to adjust and learn how to navigate. And my parents were themselves, traumatized and themselves going through a lot of, challenges and emotions. And, they weren't able to really look after me the way that they wanted to, probably, because they had their own anxieties and their own stuff because of all of this. And so basically, like many addicts, um, I raised myself. I mean, like a lot of stories. It's a lot. It doesn't, I don't believe. I think we use different vehicles, but we arrive in the same destination as addicts. And so, my story may have different parts in it, but it's still the same quality. Like there's still the same emotion and still the same development or lack of development that led me to be who, where I was. And eventually it just kind of snowballed. I started drinking, smoking cigarettes, smoking pot. And then by 19, I was just a full blown heroin addict. And yeah, it's very, it snowballs.
Well, it does. And when you're left alone, as you're growing up, you would tend to connect with those around you, and that's what those around you were doing. And I'm sure you were trying to find a place where you belonged. I mean, the story that you started with is here you are, a Jew or Jewish family in Russia being exiled and kicked out, and you think that that's normal
Yeah.
because that
Yeah.
sounds so traumatic to the rest of us. It's like our rights are so sometimes we may take them for granted that we have all the rights that we do in America, and we wouldn't even think that somebody could dislocate us from our house, right? And take that property from us. Talk about what your parents did in Russia before that all came out.
Well, we both of my parents' side were, both my grandparents and great grandparents were part of the Holocaust. And so when my grandparents returned from hiding or what have you back to Odessa. Um, Pretty much everybody, lost all of their careers and their skills and their families and their lineage and their history. So it just turned into, get a job and do whatever you can, working at factories, being a janitor, because we lost all the privilege, as even though the war was over, it, it didn't matter. We were still Jews, and so my mom was a janitor and my dad did, some carpentry, some side stuff. Like that's all they can do, to support us. But, they were very, available to me and my sister. They were there, they provided as best they could, the basics. But then once my father saw that communism was falling apart, he predicted that, we really needed to flee. Really needed to go because it was going to get worse for us, based on our socioeconomic status and our religious status. And so he made the right move. He obviously, I'm sure he's passed since, but I'm sure he didn't predict the impact that it would have on the family unit, because it's such a traumatic event. And, you know, coming from that place, we didn't understand mental health. My mom still doesn't really, we didn't understand, the need for therapy and support and assistance and asking for help. It was just, you got to do it by yourself. You don't really need to get emotional about it. Don't, get feelings about it. Just do it. Cause that's how you survive. It was just survival mode. And I think that really affected, how I approached life growing up, and affected how, also my disease, it fed into my disease of addiction, because it was like, don't talk about your emotions. They're not really that important. This is just about getting something done, move along, move forward. Stuffing, stuffing emotions. So I see it, in the bigger picture. Definitely.
And is your sister, is she older or younger than you?
She's older.
She's
She's older.
older. And what role did she play as you were growing up?
She actually left. She met a man and left and moved to a different country with him, and that was, I think, her way of coping, with things. I was too young to do that. I think all of us, used our own coping skills, or what we could at the time. My parents divorced, when I was about 12. My dad moved away, and then it was just me and my mom. And she worked to, keep everything going. And she kind of let me do whatever I wanted at that point, because she didn't have any other, there wasn't any other option really. And I just took it and I ran with it and did whatever I wanted, basically, because I didn't know how to do anything else.
Yeah, I mean, you were doing the best you could, and your mom was doing the best she could under the situation. And I mean, she's just trying to survive, right? You're both in survival mode
Yeah.
without a lot of support as to how to
Mm-hmm.
do that. What size of a group came out of Russia with you? Well, let me ask you a question first. You were in Russia, you lived in Russia based on the Holocaust and the relocation of the Jewish cultures. Is that what was happening there?
It was post Holocaust. So, I mean, nobody ever talked about that there. You didn't discuss it. It was sort of wiped out. I remember growing up and being told, don't tell anybody you're Jewish. Um, it was just my dad always drilled it into my head, don't tell anyone you're a Jew. Nobody can know you're a Jew, but they all knew we were a Jew, based on our names and, just in general. I remember in kindergarten in Russia, my teacher asking me to stand up in front of the class and telling the whole class, hey guys, this is what a Jew looks like. Um,
What? You're kidding.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And this is in Russia?
In Russia.
Oh
Yeah.
my word.
In 86, 85, 86. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's very real. And what I appreciate about living in America is the perceived distance that the culture here has from the past. in other countries. Where for me, it's not a past. The Holocaust did not happen in the past. It's very much part of my story and my life because it very much impacted and affected my family and then me. It's not a distant past. So it amazes me how the cultures are so different. How if it happened somewhere else and it was 40 years ago, then it must have been 200 years ago.
It's in the history books at that point,
It's in the
right? It's
history.
just, it happened in history. And even though that didn't happen in your lifetime, it's very much a part of your history. It's a part of your parents' ability to be able to provide for your family. It affected every part of your existence.
Yeah, emotional, mental. I mean, it really took me a long time, and recovery. I really credit recovery to so much of my understanding of human behavior and my own nature, because it really opened up my understanding of like how history really affects people in the present, and it really, you can translate it to right now to people who are struggling with the disease of addiction, because it's not just that person, it's a family disease. It's a system disease, it's a cultural disease. I mean, you can really expand outward. It's not just the individual that's affected, that's suffering, that's struggling. Um, it, it it's a whole system. And I think that's why I love working in treatment too, is that I get to look at the whole system and kind of try to help it all along.
Yeah. Well, and it's got to be empowering to know that there are options now. You didn't have those options as a kid growing up, and even in America, you really didn't have that available to you. And if you did, you didn't know it. I'm just trying to wrap my head around what that would be like. And like you said, it's all you knew. That
Mhm.
was just normal. What about your religious beliefs? I mean, what's talk to me about the difference between practicing Judaism and being a Jew, which to me seems a little derogatory. Is that a derogatory term?
Not it depends, I guess, maybe who you are, where you're coming from, or your foundation. I my daughter's in Hebrew school. I went to a very strict religious Hasidic school when we came to America, but I'm not religious. It's just not the route I took. So I think you can be religious, just like with any religion. You can be very religious and practice all the traditions, or you can extract just the principles and live by those. Um, I don't take offense to, it depends on how you say it, how you call me a Jew. I mean, I think because it is, that is my, nationality and culture. So I say I'm a Jew. But as far as like my religion goes, I think I'm more spiritual um, than traditionally religious.
Yeah.
Just in my experience. Yeah.
Well, it's so interesting because, we can talk about the religion of Judaism, but your culture, who you are, and your heritage is connected, and you can't disconnect yourself from that. But I don't
Right.
think society, the Germans or the Russians, I don't think they really disconnected that. This was your culture, and somehow that was what they were after, right? Didn't
That was,
matter what your
yeah.
religious beliefs were.
Right. Yeah, it's a race. I mean, it is. I mean, it's a bloodline, it's a tribe, and so whether you're religious or not, it doesn't matter. You're still in that, in that bloodline.
Yeah.
And I had a lot of resentments, and I part of my feeding into my disease and my cycle of craziness, was these resentments that I had against religion, and even against Judaism, because of the school. I just kind of deflected to, it was it was my parents' fault, it was the school's fault, it was Russia's fault, and it was always the typical blame game that you play when you don't want to take responsibility for where are you now, and look at solutions. And so I worked through a lot of that, obviously, but I think a lot of people in recovery struggle with religion, the concept of God, higher power, and it's one of the things that keeps people from, getting help or joining a 12-step fellowship is that God word. I think it's always been, everyone's kind of, not everyone's, but I've seen it so many times with patients and clients that they get turned off immediately by that.
Well, and if you've had this experience where these people in your country of origin, right? You grew up here, you lived here, and all of a sudden they can reject you. I mean, like, and then the God of the Bible seems fairly vengeant, right? He doesn't seem really kind and loving, and so I can see why that would become an issue, and so that's where spirituality kind of helps fill that gap, and create a different purpose and meaning, conceptualization of something we can wrap our heads around.
Absolutely. In the past, when I've had some sponsees that struggled with that concept, I always gave them the same assignment. It was like, okay, well, what sort of traits do you want your higher power to have? If you were to have a higher power, what kind of character traits would this higher power have? And it's very similar: kindness, forgiveness, love, patience, tolerance, acceptance. And I'm like, okay, well, these are all things, that if you practiced, then you would be closer to this higher power. Because if you're practicing kindness, then you're closer to kindness, right? If you're practicing, acceptance and tolerance in your life, then you're inviting that back into your life. And so now you're becoming part of something bigger than you. And so it doesn't have to be this man in the sky with a robe, or it doesn't have to be an entity or a deity. It can be your concept of what a higher power's traits are. And I think that helped a lot of people kind of, and it helps me, differentiate and become more spiritual, because I'm like, it's not about the deity, it's about the traits
Well,
that exist there.
absolutely. I agree. And I like the way you form that as, let's just start where you're at. Let's just start with an idea of something bigger than you, because that idea that you can only depend on you and you're alone in the world isn't working either, right? So
Mhm.
let's think about us as a community and that we're all connected. I love the way you describe that, which is helpful. I did not pick up on your a Russian accent, and you probably came into the country when you were young enough that you really, you've really done pretty well there. Do you still speak Russian? Is that the
I
language you spoke?
I do. Yeah, I speak Russian with my mom, and I teach my daughter here and there a little bit. She knows a little, but that's about it. Yeah, I lost my accent definitely.
Yeah, for sure. And I don't know if that's good or bad. It's just interesting. I did not expect the story you just told when I talked to you the first time.
Uh, I should have prepared you.
I was like, "What? That's not normal."
Exactly. I mean, I'm glad I see it now. For a long time, I just thought this is life, this is normal, and it was no, not at all.
Yeah.
Very toxic.
And then you didn't just move from one country to America, you moved from country to country to country until one
Yeah,
accepted you.
yeah.
And did you get accepted by America or some other country and then come to America?
It was America, so it was it's called the Vienna, Italy pipeline. If you look it up, there was three waves of Russian Jews as transitioning, or from Russia, and so we were, I think, the third wave in '89. Thousands fleeing, and we had to live in Vienna, Austria, for a few months. Basically, it was like you go to Vienna and you find anywhere to live. We stayed in the Jewish Federation assisted us a little bit financially, so we were able to stay in a hotel. But then when we had to go to Italy, we stayed in an abandoned house with three other families, and um, we just basically lived there. There's no electricity. We were sharing food, trying to we sold between us and the other families, we were selling all of our belongings to buy food. There's a documentary on the Vienna Italy pipeline, and I can't remember the name. I'm sorry, but maybe later I can I can remember it, but it's really depicts well the the travel that occurred. So it was quite the journey over maybe 5 6 months of traveling and transitioning and just waiting for America to approve you. You're just waiting for your name to be called. You're going to these meetings, these big rooms just filled to the brim with people just waiting for their name to be called to be approved to come.
And when you came to the United States and finally got here, where did they locate you?
In Scranton, Pennsylvania.
And that's not a cheap place to live.
Yeah, yeah. It's my mom immediately got a job in the laundry room of a nursing home, and she continued to work there until she retired about 5 years ago. And my dad was a janitor for most of his life too here. So I mean, they immediately went to work. That's all they knew how to do, and that was it. That's we just settled here. And I moved. I left Scranton when I was in my early 20s. I lived in a van for a while. I traveled around the country homeless, and that's how I ended up in California. But it's not cheap. And you can't navigate a culture when you're not really familiar with it either. It's very traumatizing. I've never seen a vending machine before I came here. Blue jeans, bubble gum, simple things that are just typical here were just out of this world for me.
And out of reach. And did you live in a refugee area? Like, did they have all the refugees in one area, or were you living separate?
We were one of the first families to arrive to Scranton, Russian Jew families to arrive to Scranton, Pennsylvania, and then after us, there were influx that came. So they were very good about helping us adjust, with the finding us an apartment, finding my parents jobs, putting me in the Hebrew school, and then kind of left us to just manage ourselves. But it was, it was a very it was more welcoming than we've ever experienced ever in our lives, really.
And that's the upside, except here you are in this new culture and you have no way of knowing how to manage it except to get a job and to pay your bills, and then you're just trying to figure it out. That's a tough transition that I don't know that I mean, I don't know what that would feel like, right? But it's got to feel pretty alienating, even as much as you were helped and supported through that.
It was, and it added, I think, to my that you know that thing that us addicts have, where we can do everything by ourselves. We don't need any help. That stubbornness and that ego, where I learned that, like, I don't need help. I can do this on my own. I don't need anybody because no one's been there, or I don't know how to ask for help, or so I might as well just do it my way. And that bit me in my butt growing up, because it was my way or no way.
Yeah.
I love now how I could look back and see how it all fits together. It's not isolated incidents. They all fit together like a puzzle that make the whole.
And are you able to grab hold of your roots, where you come from, what your family's story is, and have pride and what's the word I want? Have some connection and some sense of who you are and where you come from. Are you able to have that now after your substance abuse treatment and the work that you're doing now?
It took a long time, and I can happily say yes. And I really didn't know I would ever get there, because I didn't. My sponsor once asked me this. She's like, "Where are your roots?" And it was a very simple question, and it was a jaw dropping moment for me. I was like, "What do you mean?" She's like, "Where are your roots?" And I realized I had none. I had no roots this whole time, just kind of like a leaf in the wind. Just that was it. And I had to find my roots. And it wasn't about creating roots either. I mean, I created the roots of, establishing myself, of my career, having my daughter, but it was like me creating those roots. But where were my roots that I generated from? And I have really had to dig and look back and find that. And I have a connection to my lineage. I feel connected to my great grandparents and the struggles and the history of the Jewish people, and also of Russia and as a whole and how it developed, over time. And so I was able to find, yes, you know, a connection finally in my roots. And it was thanks to, my sponsor and my recovery and my step work. Otherwise, I'd still be a leaf in the wind. Yeah.
That's pretty incredible. I'm just wrapping my head around the journey that you would take, and how it's still the same in many ways. You've got to look at those core issues, the things that are driving it. But the relatability, I mean, I know that substance abuse is substance abuse, but when you go into treatment, you're not talking to a lot of refugees, that are going through treatment, or people who have experienced your background. There's some out there, but not a ton of them. So did you feel like you were different somehow, or did you really feel like you related?
At first, I felt like I was unique, until I learned, what it means to feel like you're terminally unique. And then I started thinking about it. I was like, okay, well, my experience may be different than most of these people in this room, but at the present time, I'm in the same hell that they are. I found the same hell that they did in my disease. And it really boils down to the quality of life, and it's not where I came from or where you came from or how much drugs I did or didn't do in comparison to this other person next to me, or if I was the junkie in the alley and they were the professional, sneaking wine. It's not about the journey, or the aspects of our disease and our experience. It's about how it affected the quality of our life and the kind of hell we all are familiar with when we look in the mirror. And that's the connection, and that's part of my roots that I found with other people in recovery, was that it doesn't matter how we got here. We found that same special dark place, and we also found a way out of there together. And so like that's how I had to flip it, because I was unique and different, and not really. Not really.
Sort of, but not really, right? At the core, you're a human being, and everybody else is a human being trying to live a human life, and it's messy. And being able to, because the Jewish culture has been so beat up and dislodged, and really some mistreatment has happened to the Jewish culture, and so you carry that as part of your tradition. And I don't know that it's different, but it reminds me a lot of America and slavery, and what happened in that culture, and there's a lot of the Black American culture now that holds that history, and so there is things you can tie to, but healing is about looking forward, right? It's about looking at, how do I want to show up now with the tools that I have now, and then look back and learn from that past. So I agree with you. There's both going on there, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And the interesting part is that I can grab different things from my story, and they apply to almost everything. So I could relate to almost anything because there's so many pieces to it. And that's kind of the plus. And then because I can do that, then I also have more solutions, because I have so many pieces, working there.
Oh yeah, I agree. And your resilience has got to be right at the top, right? Because you've had to face some things that not everybody's had to face, and that increases your ability to have that resilience, and to know that it can get really bad and I can still rise above it. I can still find solutions and find help. And so, I don't know, I'm really impressed with your story, and I'm
Thanks.
so grateful that you're willing to share it because it's really touched me, and I'm going to be thinking about, wow, what would have that been like, right? I always try and put myself in your shoes and go, oh my heck, what would I have been thinking and feeling, and you know, you wouldn't. I'm sure there were days you went without food, and
Yeah.
it's just, yeah,
Yeah.
it's just a lot to that story. And I can guarantee that your background and experience can touch the lives of many people, and you know, and really share that story of hope. Talk a little bit about board prep and what you're doing at board prep recovery, and kind of what's going on there.
Absolutely. I've been working there for about a year. I transitioned to board prep from a nonprofit world. So I've worked in the field for nearly 15 years and mainly in nonprofit. And the population that you serve in nonprofit, as you know, is who they're usually underserved, they're not privileged background, they don't have access to many services, and so that's been my experience working in the field. And I decided to make a change, and move into the private sector, and so started working at Board Prep Recovery, and it's really a small treatment center. It's very small, private, but I have learned in the last year and come to realize just very recently, that it really caters to a niche that gets overlooked in the treatment world, in the addiction world. As you know, addiction and mental health have been stigmatized, for forever. We've gotten better over the last couple of years. We have, more communities, larger communities that are embracing, treatment, embracing mental health, treatment, and substance abuse, but there's still a lot of more work to do. But the people I think that are the most overlooked who are struggling with addiction are health professionals, doctors, nurses, other working professionals. You don't expect a doctor to need help, right? They're the helpers. You don't expect a nurse to need help. She's the helper. And so I think this population really gets overlooked, and they're fine because they're a doctor. They're fine because they're a nurse. But you wouldn't think that there's so many who are struggling with addiction and mental health. And there's not they're not going to go to a community-based treatment program that's nonprofit to get help, uh, because they're from they fit a different criteria, right? So where do they go? They either continue using and drinking, in secret because they're so stigmatized because nobody expects them to be sick, and so I think it's a population that's overlooked and that's not expected, and board prep specializes in treating, med professionals, health professionals, other professionals. And I think I really enjoy it because I'm like, these people really do, need help just like every other addict.
Oh, I could not agree more. You know, and we talk about addiction and mental health, but that's a human experience. It's not, you know, my struggle may not be addiction, but that doesn't mean I'm not struggling with something and that I don't need help on some way, shape, or form, right? That's a human condition.
Hmm.
So I love the way and it's different sometimes when you start with a professional who has, you know, who has built a career and has built some of those things. They have a different starting point a little
Hmm.
bit. Um,
Yeah.
and
They require different treatment. I mean,
yeah,
it just like the disease of addiction is not the same for everyone. It's different for everyone. We just talked about my experience is different than someone else's. It's still the disease, but it's different. So treatment needs to be different, because everyone's experience is different and it's not one size fits all. So what may work for, someone over here is not going to work for someone over there. So I think Board Prep really found an interesting, corner, to work with and to, to treat. they individualize their care. So because they're so small, it's by design. It's 18 bed capacity. That's about it. That's it. That's as big as they go. And because they're so small, they can individualize everyone's care to their specific needs, and help them still kind of retain their sense of dignity while they're in treatment as well, so that they feel there's a normalcy to what they're going through. It's not this hard blow, because if you're a doctor, you have this career, you've built this career, you may have some sort of esteem in the community, right? Or you're high profile or something, to where you are ashamed, or there's more shame involved with you getting help or getting services. So we try to kind of retain their respect and their dignity while providing treatment at the same time, so it doesn't feel like they're institutionalized.
Oh, absolutely. And is the length of stay for a professional similar to the length of stay for someone else?
It's the same treatment modality. It's the same because the treatment models work across the board, right? 28 to 90 days of residential level or PHP level of care, and then a step down to intensive outpatient, depending on your progress, obviously. But we know scientifically evidence-based treatment works, right? So it's the same application. We just tweak some of the services a little to fit the person's need, their treatment planning, the things that are available to them, the different types of groups. We have groups that are specific to med professionals, so we can focus on that. There's also caduceus. I don't know if you've heard of caduceus meetings, but they're 12-step programs geared towards health professionals and med professionals. So it's like a 12-step meeting, but for specific to them, so they can find peers, that can support them.
I love it, and I agree. I think it's a group, it's a niche that really gets overlooked because we depend on them, and so they can't get sick. It's like a mom and a dad, right? You can't get
Yeah.
sick because I need you as a child to take care of me.
Yeah, and I've learned, it's it's interesting for me to transition from nonprofit to the profit world, and see the differences, and how different agencies and operate and handle things, because of their funding, or because of their contracts, or if they're private. And it if you take a more of a step back, it's really more of a system issue, and a national issue, why there's such a difference in services or access to services for certain people, because we can provide service to everyone. I mean, it's possible. Everyone can get help. It doesn't matter if you're on the street and homeless, or if you're a wealthy professional. Everyone deserves to get the help they need, and it's can be made available. It's just the system that needs to be fixed in order for that to happen across the board fairly.
Yeah, that's
Right.
true. Well, and the idea of a professional taking, 30, 60, 90 days off of work feels a little daunting. And so that would be, that's a barrier that they've got to figure out how to manage too.
Right. Yeah. And a lot of them, they're already maybe referred, because, they have that buffer of the professionals resource network, or other states have. You're in Utah, so I think you have DOPL, DOPL. They oversee, health professionals, and they kind of help them if they get into a little trouble or experiencing issues. They kind of help them and get them evaluated and see if they need services or help. So you have those buffers in place, that help the health professionals retain their jobs, get treatment, and then retain their licenses and get back to work, instead of just you messed up, goodbye. You lose your whole career, your whole education, everything that you worked for. So nobody wants that. Nobody wants anybody to lose their job or their career. There's a value in what people do, and they're skilled. We just want them to get help. you know
Well, that's the goal, is to let's get people back on their feet and help them thrive, right? Because it's an illness, it's not a life sentence, and there is things that can be done to really help and support that, that change in lifestyle.
Hmm.
So I love that. That's fantastic.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, I really, it's been an eye opener for me to work here, because I didn't know how I would feel. It's a different type of population. It's a whole different sector. But I realized that it's just as needed, and it's just as important as anything else I was doing before with a different population. Because at the end of the day, our disease will kill us. At the end of the day, if we don't get the help we need, we will die from drinking or using drugs. And it doesn't matter who you are, what your background is. If you need the help, there needs to be help available. And I'm glad that there is for this population too.
Yeah, well, and well spoken, because you're right. At the end of the day, it is life and death, and everybody deserves to get that help. I'm wondering, Julia, if this has been an incredible moment to talk with you and to just learn your story, and I'm wondering if you could share some of your contact information so that people know how to get a hold of you. I imagine that the population that you serve is very unique, and they're looking for a place that's safe. And so maybe
Hmm.
share some of that contact information.
Sure. My name is Julia, and I can be reached. I have a personal line that anybody can call or text me on, because I am, heading over admissions at Board Prep. So my phone number is 813-434-1272. And I'm available all the time, except when I'm sleeping.
Well, I'm glad you're allowed to sleep, because that's
Yes,
important. But you
yes,
want to be available for people when they need you, and so that's
absolutely.
important too.
Absolutely, yes. I love, answering questions and helping people navigate treatment and helping them understand and feel safe about it. For a lot of people, it's their first time. They don't know what to expect. They don't know how to navigate around it or what to do or how to ask for help. They just know that there's a problem. Um, and that's the first step is knowing that there's a problem, understanding that, there's something that can be done about it. And so that's where we come in and kind of help you navigate that. And it's a journey. It's not easy, but it's well worth it. Well worth it. I see a lot of successes. We have an alumni program. We have picnics, alumni picnics. It's wonderful to see people coming back, getting back to work. It's beautiful to see, people coming in at the end of their rope, having been out of work. A doctor, who's been a doctor her whole life, can't practice, and is at the bottom of kind of her bottom, and then you watch her flourish, and her cheeks get rosy. She starts to smile more often. She's sharing in groups. She's active. She's engaged. Like there's a spark back in her eye, and then the next thing you know, she's going on interviews. She's getting a job. She's working as an MD. Like she's back at work, helping other people, saving other people's lives. And it's beautiful to just watch that transition. And I like being a helper, but what I'm doing is I'm also helping helpers get better. So it trickles down even more.
Yeah, without that assistance, it's going to be really tough, because we're already struggling with having enough people, enough helpers, right, in the medical field and in the behavioral health field. There's a shortage, and there's a reason why there's a shortage. And if we're not going to take care of those people, and been a lot of effort put towards helping and creating programs that will help those people. And like you said, it's not, sorry, last straw, you're done, but you're struggling. What's happening? Let us help you. Let us get
Right.
support around you. And
And
that's the way we need to address those kind of issues.
absolutely, nobody wants anyone to fail. Um, everyone wants everyone to succeed and be better and at their jobs and also be healthier and happier. Um, this pandemic really had a huge effect on the health professionals. This is what I've seen. just in the last year working here. I mean, so much trauma and so much mental health, and alcoholism and drug abuse, diverting from work, diverting medications, because of the stress level and the trauma that they're experiencing from the pandemic. And travel nurses, especially just having to move from COVID unit to COVID unit to COVID hospital to from COVID hospital, being away from their families. Sometimes the only thing we know how to do to cope is to drink, to escape. And then that turns into a habit. It gets comfortable. It gets, easy to keep doing it. And then before you know it, you can't stop. And then you never had a problem before, and now you do. And just because you don't come from a family of addiction, or you don't come from, genetics, you're not predisposed to it. It doesn't matter, right? If right now it's a problem, then there's solutions, right? Then you can do something about it. We don't have to keep going and making it worse. And I think, like I said, like that population is overlooked because you don't expect them to have a problem. So they don't expect to have a problem. Even when it gets out of control, they're still like, no, it's not a problem, because I'm a professional. I'm the helper.
It's so true. There's so much pressure put on them and expectations and, their status, and there's all sorts of things that makes it really, really difficult for them to reach out and get the help that they need.
Yeah.
And fear for all of us, fear of what that's going to mean, and who will then know that we aren't who we're trying to pretend to be. We really do have problems, because nobody wants to have a problem. But truth be told, we all have problems.
Yes, absolutely. And and I get a lot of people that call that, they want me to assure them, is this confidential? I'm like, well, absolutely. We follow HIPAA, and, absolutely it is. And, they're very worried about, somebody finding out, or what's going to happen. Can they ever work again? And absolutely. Absolutely. Nobody wants you to lose your job, especially, these monitoring agencies that monitor the health professionals, DOPL, PRN. Their whole purpose is to get people back to work, is to see, okay, well, what do you need? How can we help you? And let's get you back to work, not to put you out of work. They want to see more people in the field. So the fear is irrational. It's the disease, when you have those fears, it's irrational fear.
You say that, but it doesn't feel irrational, does it?
No. No.
Oh, but I love the way you talk about that. It's true. It feels so big and overwhelming, but to get help is such a relief. To actually finally find a place where you can be open and where you can be honest and get back your life and your integrity and your sense of well-being is huge, and that's really the goal. So I love the way you talk about that and the what's needed there. It's important. Julia, this has been a very unexpected pleasure for me to get to visit with you and hear your story. It's a pretty incredible story, so I don't want to ever minimize how incredible. You say that it was just normal, but I'm telling you, your story was a little bit extraordinary.
Thank you. It's still, very normal to me. Familiar, I don't know. I haven't lived anyone else's story. But I'm grateful for the opportunity to be sitting here and sharing it, and I credit recovery, and I credit people that have helped me, and I credit the courage that I've had to ask for help, to just be able to do this today and get to a place in my life that I am today. So yes, very grateful.
So fantastic to have you. And and I think you've said it all. I can't think of any ending words or last phrases that we could add to this to make it any better, but I sure appreciate you sharing your number. And Boardprep Recovery Center is the name of your company, and really focusing in on that medical professional, which is such a need. And so, I just encourage people to reach out. I'm sure I would reach out just to know you and to understand your story more, because it's pretty incredible. And, rub shoulders with somebody that's done something pretty difficult, very difficult and challenging, and come so far. So thank you for the work that you do. I appreciate it. And thanks for being on today.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.